and welcome everyone taking time to join today, this evening meetup. My name is Desiree. I'm from Statistic Canada. And joining me, we have today's presenter, Darren Lipsky, my colleague. He's in Winnipeg. So before we start, in the spirit of respect and truth, I physically live in Calgary, so I would like to deliver land acknowledgement before the session starts. So I'm so grateful that I live and work in the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 regions in southern Alberta, and which include the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including Chiniki, Westport, and Wesley First Nations. And Calgary is also the homelands to the historical Northwest Métis and to the Métis Nations of Alberta Region 3. I encourage you to take a minute to acknowledge the land that's where you're physically before the session starts.
Awesome. Thank you, Desiree. Okay, I'll share my screen now. Hopefully we'll share the right one. Yep, I think so. View slideshow. Okay. So we're everybody can see my screen, okay? Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we can.
Good. Okay, so we are Data for Good Regina, and we are led by three fearless chapter leads: Kevin Hayes, Scott Wells, and Josh West. I believe Scott is here, and I think I saw Josh too.
Oh, I'm here too. Yeah.
Awesome. And then they're aided by myself, the community lead. I mostly organize these meetups, and by Heidi, who sends out all the communications for Data for Good. So if you've got any of our newsletters, or there was also like a meetup reminder earlier this weekend, that's all from her. And then we shouldn't forget all the other countless volunteers that help with the projects that we do with not-for-profit organizations with data. Our purpose is to build data literacy in socially focused organizations and contribute positively to the data community in Saskatchewan. One of the ways we do that is we organize these meetups to raise data literacy and data awareness in Saskatchewan and the surrounding area. And you can see some of the people we've had talk before. We've had people from Sask Polytechnic, NumPy, Shopify, Common Approach, many different organizations. And now I'll just give it to Scott to talk about the other major thing we do, which is projects with not-for-profit organizations.
Thanks, Cody. A couple of the projects I just wanted to give an update on are the ones that we have underway. So the first one, Phoenix Residential, they offer housing and support, among other services, to the community for some of the most vulnerable people within our city. And so we've got a project team right now, just a couple of folks that are working through their information. The goal for Phoenix Residential is really to help tell their story, to showcase all of the great work that they're doing, and also really the value that they end up providing to the community, that sometimes for a lot of these organizations is really hard for them to articulate. And so that's really what the team is hoping to do there. Eden Care Community, so they offer housing for seniors. And kind of one of the pieces that we really wanted to get involved in, and why, is related to the lower income or kind of assisted support for some of the elder community. And so really with this one is trying to understand the client base so that they can target support and programs for these folks a little bit better. So both those programs are currently and projects are underway today. The other one, which is Saskatchewan Association of Sexual Sexual Assault Services of Saskatchewan. They've come to us very recently. This is a project that we're going to be kicking off right away, and we'll be looking for volunteers. So there will be a volunteer call out email going out probably in the next couple of days for this project. We're looking for a small project team. They do have some publicly available data that they want to be able to visualize essentially and put out to the public web. So this is from whether it's police, RCMP, or otherwise, this information, and really just making it available to show what's going on in and around Saskatchewan related to sexual violence. And so again, we'll be having a call out go out pretty quick. So if you aren't a volunteer on our website, you can go to our website, regina.dataforgood.ca, and fill out the volunteer form. And then we will be sending out an email to all of those folks to see who would like to join the project. It is on a first come, first serve basis for a lot of these. And so if you don't get a chance to go on this project, we do have a couple of other ones that we'll be hoping to launch right away. We won't necessarily release who they are, but they're a little bit larger ones. And so we'll have a little bit more room for folks probably in the next couple of months.
Thank you, Scott. Let's go to the next one. So, without further ado, I want to introduce our great speaker, Dan Lezubski. I hope I said that right. So, he is a consultant analyst with Statistics Canada, and he has worked there for 10 years. But he has not only worked at Statistics Canada, he's worked in academia, not-for-profit, and the private sector. He has a master's in city planning, so I think he is absolutely terrific for introducing us to how we can use Statistics Canada data to understand our community. So I will stop sharing now, and I will give it to you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Welcome. Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue, everyone. I'm really excited, and thank you, Desiree, my colleague Desiree, for the land acknowledgement. I am in Winnipeg. I refrained from wearing a Bombers t-shirt tonight, but I decided not to. And so I'm, again, just in the spirit of reconciliation with our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit brothers and sisters, I'm in Treaty 1 territory. So I'm really looking forward to this evening. When we were presented with the opportunity to join you, I thought, this is, I don't care how late it is for me, I'm willing to do it. And I love the opportunity to join people who recognize the value of data in conjunction with other information and research tools to help us better understand our communities and to make our communities better. So I've been so excited to get to this tonight. So I'm going to share my screen. I just wanted to say, and I recognized a few names on the list. So hello to those people I've had chances to interact with in my day job at Statistics Canada. But I just wanted to say, I like to do these very informally. So I have some PowerPoint slides, and if I have time, I'll take you to Statistics Canada's website and show you some tools and resources. If we don't have time, that's okay. You have your whole life to explore StatsCan's website. But if you have questions, I encourage people to ask questions throughout. You don't have to wait till the end. I will try and make sure I leave time so that we can have some fruitful discussion at the end and maybe go into a little bit more detail. But if I'm going over a concept or things of that nature, I've found that through the time that I've been teaching, people will sometimes say, well, I'm not understanding that concept, but no one else is asking a question, so I must be the only one. If you're not getting it, your other participants probably aren't getting it too. So feel free. I want you to get as much as you can out of what we're going to cover tonight. And I'm hoping that I piqued your curiosity enough that you want to explore this further and delve into the Statistics Canada data and some of the things I'm going to touch on tonight. So with that, again, looking forward to this evening. I'm going to share my screen and get started. If someone could just confirm that you're able to see my screen okay?
Looks good.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So yeah, we're gonna have a little bit of a discussion about how you can use Statistics Canada data in conjunction, ideally, with other data sources and sources of information to try and better understand your community. And we're going to walk you through a couple of sort of resources that I want to bring to your attention. And I'm going to highlight something that actually was just recently released that I won't delve into. I probably won't have time to delve into great detail tonight, but sort of speak about some new resources that are available. Want to draw people's attention particularly to a measure, a resource that Statistics Canada is still in development and we're working on, but it came to my mind as one of the potential sources that might be really useful when we were discussing, or the issue of the question of libraries, public libraries in Regina. And, are they located where they need to be, and are they serving the function that we hope they are serving? And so when I heard that, I thought to myself, libraries and data, what a great combination. How could you go wrong? So I couldn't say no to the presentation. I will say at the outset, most of the examples I'm going to use and the tool that I'm going to show, I'm going to focus on Regina, but there is data available for other communities in Saskatchewan, not just large communities. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is when I start to show you the details with respect to the way the data is disseminated. We're going to have a little bit of an introduction to some really important concepts with respect to how Statistics Canada disseminates data. Introduce you, if you're not familiar already, with things like dissemination blocks and dissemination areas and census tracts. So all those fun things that I'm going to encourage you to sort of explore further. And then, as I said, if we have time, we'll try and navigate the website, and I'll show you a couple of resources that I think will be useful. So that's the plan for tonight. Hopefully we'll have time, but if not, we'll see how it goes. I, of course, will give the obligatory plug about Statistics Canada. We are the National Statistical Agency, and so we do as the Statistics Act requires. It sort of identifies our legislative responsibilities, and our job is to collect, compile, and report information to Canadians about the population, about our community, about our resources and our economy and our socio and economic demographics and how they're changing. But there's also a second component to the Statistics Act, which we sometimes don't necessarily pay as much attention to, but that is building statistical capacity. And I think in an age where we're overwhelmed with information in many respects, having the ability to be a good data consumer, having some data literacy and the ability to sort of recognize good from bad data is really crucial. It's crucial to our democracy. It's crucial to our roles as citizens. And it's really crucial when we recognize the value of using data as part of helping us make good decisions. So that's sort of the other reason why Desiree and I sort of jumped at the opportunity to come speak to you tonight. Again, with Statistics Canada, I'm going to talk to a great extent about the census of population, because it's one of the most robust tools that we have for looking at small, granular, small area data. But the census is not the only sort of data source that Statistics Canada does. We're 400 or more active surveys, and our job is to make sure we're providing Canadians with good objective information. So I also highlight the information that's available on the website that people can access for free. My job as a consulting analyst, I teach workshops and things of that nature about turning statistics into stories and survey design and things of that nature. But I also work with clients who are looking for data. So we are trying to make sure that this is your data. It gets into your hands, and you're using this data as accurately and as effectively as you can. So that's sort of the quick spiel about Statistics Canada. I did want to just spend a moment. I just added this slide because it was a very recent release, a new resource on Statistics Canada's website. I believe my colleague Desiree, she may post a link. I likely won't have time to delve into it tonight, but Statistics Canada has an action plan or a desire to be in a position to release more granular level data, smaller levels of data at smaller levels of geography. We're not there yet, but we're working towards it. We hear it from people, from our data users, that this is one of the things they're looking for. And so this is just one of the new initiatives that was recently released with respect to municipal and local data portal that's on Statistics Canada's website. And there's some interactive tools there and access to some information that may be useful for people who are particularly dealing at the local level and looking for data and information. So I just wanted to spend a moment or two. As I said, I likely won't have time to delve into it in great detail, but I wanted to highlight it. And as I said, the idea of libraries and data, I mean, can there be any more foundational elements to a civil society where we're recognizing the importance of people being aware and knowledgeable of what is going on in their community, than to talk about the role of libraries and to talk about the role of data. So I couldn't pass this up. I'm excited to be here tonight. So let's talk a little bit about, in the context of that, before I get into the census data, which is sort of probably the key element that I'll talk about, I wanted to highlight a data tool that I think might be of interest to some. Some of you may be aware of it, some of you may not. And I just wanted to sort of talk about how we use information and Statistics Canada's role. So our job is to provide, as I've said, information that allows us to understand how our community is changing, aggregate data to the extent. So when you're thinking about questions like libraries, the role of libraries, who are they serving, where are they located, that's not necessarily information that the National Statistical Agency is going to have or is going to be able to help you with. Our data, the data that's available from Statistics Canada, is going to be more in the context of understanding how communities are changing over time. The census, again, is a prime example of that, and being able to look at different censuses over different time periods to see how communities are changing, just the social, the economic, the demographic characteristics, and use that as a planning tool. You know, my background is city planning and demography. Demography is a real powerful tool because age is a good indicator of behavior. And so you can look to see what type of services, needs, and resources that communities are likely going to need by the age structure and by the changing nature of the composition of the population. So that's Statistics Canada's role. There's another role that local data providers or local agencies are likely going to have an important role in, and that comes down to the sort of the notion of, you know, who is using libraries these days? How are they using libraries? I think the question when we originally were discussing, could we step in and do this presentation tonight, was that the project you're working on is, you know, the existing 9 public libraries. Are they, you know, are they located where they need to be? And so those are really important questions, but those are questions that Stats can't necessarily answer. And then as an aside, I will not, I promise, I will not turn this into a research methods class, but I want you to think about, from stepping back from a data perspective lens, in terms of how do we tackle this question, right? We have people's roles and views of how the role of libraries, but you can also have data that helps us quantify, gives a sense of you know, how many people are involved, how many people use libraries, things of that nature. And I just wanted to sort of highlight the role of secondary data from StatsCan, for example. Secondary data is data that's collected by someone else with which you might use. And then primary data. Is there or are there data gaps or information that you might need to go out and collect yourself? And so it's really useful to be familiar with what data is there. I actually just finished teaching today a survey design course. And one of the things we talk about in that course is, well, do you actually need to do a survey? Have you gone through the data and the literature, and are you sure that the information you're looking for isn't available already? And only when you come to the conclusion that the data you're looking for isn't available, then you should seriously think about, you know, we're going to conduct our own data collection. primary research activities. So it's really useful for us to be just familiar with what's out there. And that's a challenge in and of itself. So that's sort of the beginning point. The data set that I wanted to highlight to people, and again, you may or may not be familiar with this, is this new tool that Statistics Canada has developed, initially released in 2020. And it's called the Proximity Measures Data Viewer. And again, it provides a sort of wealth of information at the granular level. And it's work that is still in progress. So, it's going to be developed further. There'll be future iterations where hopefully we'll have more comprehensive information. But it's a very interesting tool because there are right now 10 sort of measures that are in there. And one of them is libraries. The others are things like childcare, and grocery stores, and parks and transit stops. And it's essentially a data set that looks at how close are dissemination blocks. And I'll talk a little bit about what dissemination blocks are shortly, but how close are they to these various services and amenities? And so it's a really interesting data set for people to look at and get an idea of where libraries are located, how close they are to transit stops, how close they are to schools, how close they are to hospitals and things of that nature. So for example, here for the proximity measure for libraries, it talks about the proximity of library within walking distance, 1.5 kilometers, located where the actual library is, and then the distance around the census dissemination areas. And you can get a sense of where there are pockets of population. And the really interesting thing that I thought was telling is it almost provides the opportunity to look for what's not there. And what I mean by that is oftentimes we'll be able to identify where those libraries are. We'll be able to look for data that's around those communities. I'll show you that specifically. But this proximity data measure also gives an indication of how many dissemination areas, how many dissemination census tracts are not within close proximity to a library. And some of them may be commercial, or industrial, or commercial, but some of them may be residential. And so it might be one avenue, one different way of looking at the research question of saying, are these areas that are not within an immediate proximity of a library, the 9 existing libraries, are they being underserved? So it's just an interesting way to look at the research question that was raised. So just as an aside here, I hope to have time tonight to take you right to StatsCan website and show you the tool. If we don't, I really encourage you to go into the proximity measure database, play around with it, download the data, and you'll start to see sort of how the data is organized. This is just an indication of the location of the 9 libraries in Regina and the proximity of how close the various dissemination areas are to those 9 libraries. And then the gaps in the middle are indicating areas that are not deemed to be of close proximity. So that's the one tool. And I just want to sort of give you an example to think about. I looked at the data and said, well, okay, well, of the libraries, how exactly does the data set work? And so here's just an example of the George Rothwell Library. And the data tool indicates that the actual library is located in a particular dissemination block, which is 4706-01-55006. You'll see by the way the data set is organized, it indicates yes or no. Is it located? And then it gives a proximity measure. And the proximity measure is basically a sort of, as the tool describes, it's sort of a gravity model, which is a fancy term for, it accounts for the distance between the dissemination blocks and all the other dissemination blocks within proximity to that dissemination block that contains the library. And so the score ranges from 0 to 1, 0 being, or the lowest score being less proximity, higher scores being more proximate to the actual location of libraries. So you can look to see just sort of how close these areas are. And, you know, the really interesting thing is, and I'll show you that shortly, is that dissemination areas are one area of geography from StatsCan, but they're limited in their utility because there's only population and dwelling counts that get released from the census. But when we know the dissemination block, we can then correlate that back to what dissemination area that dissemination block is located in. And dissemination areas are areas where census data is available. And dissemination areas aggregate up into census tracts. And census tracts are a really nice way to look at data and see how data for Regina has changed over time. So this is a very quick introduction to sort of what the tool can do. And these are just the little examples here. As I said, the key, or at least the key for me, and one of the interesting aspects is by knowing what dissemination block a library is located in, you can then trace it back to what dissemination area. And then from what dissemination area, you can trace it back to what census tract. So of the 9 public libraries in Regina, you'll see here what the dissemination proximity database indicates or shows where they are and which census tracts they're located in. So that's a starting point for how you might want to go about collecting data about your community and looking at the most recent census data and ideally historical census data. So I've introduced some concepts that some of you may or may not necessarily be familiar with. I generally sort of come from the perspective that oftentimes a lot of the data users are not that conversant with statistics candid geography. There is a logic and a sequence and a method to how we disseminate data. And so it is helpful, just from a data user's perspective, or if you're just nosy, it is helpful to sort of understand the logic of how the information is structured and disseminated. So I'm going to spend just a few moments talking about some concepts that I've already introduced: dissemination blocks, dissemination areas, census tracts. But if anyone has any questions, please feel free to post in the chat, or as I said, I like to do these informally. So if you have questions about the proximity measures database, if you've used it, let me know how you feel or how you felt about using it. If you haven't had a chance to use it, I hope that I piqued your curiosity enough to want to delve into it a little bit further. So any questions so far? And if not, I'll keep going. That's the challenge. The challenge. If you don't have questions, I'll keep talking.
So I do have a question. Hi, Darren.
Yes, please.
My name is Aditi. I just wanted to ask, if you were to look at, say, adult population in a DA, so how do you do that? Because if you go to Stat Canada website, I was just exploring it a few days back, and what they have is age grouped data. So you have 14 to 19, and then you have 20 to 24. And what I was trying to get is data from 18 and above population in a DA. So how do we do that? Is it possible?
It is, and there are specific. So I am hoping to have some time to show you the census profiles. Census profiles are usually the tool that most data users start with when they sort of delving into Statistics Canada census data. But there are also data tables. And data tables are tables that generally cross-tabulate different variables. And there are specific tables that are available by single year of age. So you're able to sort of collapse and aggregate age categories. And if I have time, or maybe Desiree might be able to provide a link to one of them. The question is at what level of geography you're looking at. And that's actually a great segue into what I was sort of hoping to discuss now. It's helpful for people to recognize the sort of the way the information is organized from a geographical perspective. But yes, there are tables that provide data by single year of age from the census. And if we don't get a chance to it, hopefully I'll show you at the end.
That'd be perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Any other questions? If not, I'm going to spend just a few moments talking a little bit about the concepts I've been alluding to. So again, this is a really useful tool because it allows us to start narrowing down our focus of where we should be looking for data if we want to try and understand the area and areas around the public libraries. But I just wanted to sort of give you an indication of some of the results that from the data set that I looked at. So the index, the measure scores range from, as I've said, 0 to 1. Lower scores are less proximity to a library or whatever variable you're looking at, transit stop, education center, healthcare, whatever it might be. That's the sort of the way the index is structured. And then the higher score. And so the scores for those areas for which they were close enough to a library to have an index score range in Regina from 0.04 to 0.719. So that gives you an indication of the range. If you looked at the top five scores, it should come as no surprise to any of you. I wasn't surprised that all 5 dissemination blocks that had the highest proximity scores were also 5 dissemination blocks that were actual locations of a public library. So again, you start to see the sort of how the relationship works. So closer to the public library, it's not exact. The coordinates are based on what are called the centroid point of the reference point for Stats Canada. So it's not exact to the actual address, but it gives an indication of how close or how far these areas are from public libraries in Regina. And as I said, the data also shows that there are 160 dissemination areas for which no index was calculated, which means they were too far from a library to calculate a proximity index, and over 1,300 dissemination blocks. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the old joke about a researcher or someone who lost their house keys and they're looking in the brushes for their house key, and someone come and asks them, what are you looking for? So I lost my house keys. And I said, oh, you lost them here? They said, no, I lost them over there, but the light's better here. Oftentimes we're guilty of using data because we have it available to us. But this is a way of looking at it and saying, aha, I can identify areas I should be looking at that might not necessarily stand out in terms of based on the data. So this is pointing you to areas that may actually be underserved as a starting point for where you could explore, where you can look at the characteristics of those communities and how they differ from those communities that do have public libraries. So again, just a very interesting or different way of looking at the research question. And just to put things in context, City of Regina, Regina Census Metropolitan Area, has 61 census tracts into 2021. So census tracts are, the city is divided up into what could be classified as neighborhoods. And in 2001, there were 51. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples later where the census can be a really valuable tool, but you also have to be aware of changes in variable definitions and changes in geography to make sure that you're using the data accurately and interpreting the data accurately. I'll show you specifically why I'm raising this shortly, but and again, 421 dissemination areas in Regina. So oftentimes we have to think about making a research question manageable. I used to teach at the University of Manitoba. I would always tell my students, if you have a vague research question or really broad research question, you're making your job more difficult. So can you be more concise? Can you make it more manageable? And so you might want to look at data for all of the 421 dissemination areas, or you might want to make it more manageable and look at the 61 census tracts, and the dissemination areas all roll up or aggregate up into census tracts. So it's just a way of thinking about how can I make this more manageable. So I'm not here to tell you how to do your research. I'm simply pointing ways in which you can consider looking at the data that's available from the census, from Statistics Canada, as a way to see how a community is changing and how you can make that a more manageable process. So again, this is just some context. I won't spend too much time, but I want to make sure people are clear on the terms we're using. So dissemination block is the smallest level of geography for which data is released, but only population and dwelling counts, nothing else. Statistics Canada has to protect the confidentiality of respondents. So we can't release data at small levels of geography that might either directly or indirectly identify a respondent. So dissemination blocks are a really useful tool, but they're limited with respect to the amount of information you can glean from them, from the census, for example. And sample surveys would never generally have samples large enough to get down to list level of geography. So that's a dissemination block, and each dissemination block aggregates up into a dissemination area. And dissemination areas are the smallest level of geography where you can get all of the census variables. So you can get age, you can get indigenous population, you can get ethnicity, you can get income, you can get low income, you can get educational attainment level. All of those variables that are contained within the census are available at the dissemination area level. And dissemination areas aggregate up again together to form census tracts. And census tracts are, again, somewhat comparable to neighborhoods, not exactly, but they could be somewhat considered neighborhoods. So you could look at how Regina is changing overall. You know, Regina increased by 5.2% between 2016 and 2021, but some of the census tracts actually declined in population. I'll show you a couple of those census tracts that have libraries located in them that actually have population decline. So that internal dynamic of what's going on within the city starts to emerge when you start to look at smaller areas of geography and the data for them. And census generally are a really useful tool. Census tracts are generally a really useful tool for looking at your community and understanding your community at the sub-citywide level, because they tend to be consistent with respect to their boundaries, except when they start to reach a population size where they need to be split. And I'll show you an example of that specifically in one of the census tracts where one of the libraries is located in. You'll see that historical data is not available because it's in a census tract that was split over time. So these are some of the considerations you need to think about when you're using census data from a historical perspective: changes in boundaries, changes in geography, and changes in concepts. So that's a quick introduction to, and again, you know, just sort of to think about the logic of how Statistics Canada disseminates geography data. This is a sort of a hierarchy or a scheme. It's almost like I don't know if you're familiar with the Russian nesting dolls. When you open one and there's another one inside, and you open that one and there's another one inside, and you open that. So the geographies tend to sort of like a Lego set. They are linked and related to each other. And this sort of shows that approach. And when I teach census workshops, I talk about there are two different ways you can approach census data. You can start at the national provincial level and work your way down. Or you could start at the dissemination area and work your way up. And you'll see how those different geographies add up and aggregate together. So that's a quick introduction to census geography. For those who are familiar with census, I apologize for the refresher. For those who are new to census, there's a world of new beginnings out there for you as you start to explore this information. And one other last tool, a concept I want to talk about, there's some tools that are available to help you understand and recognize those geography changes over time. And so there is, particularly in this respect, the correspondence files that show what dissemination block and how it's located, or what census tract it's located in, or what dissemination and then what census tract. So there's files that are available to do that. There's also GeoSuite, which is a tool that also allows you to go type in Regina, and you can look at the different levels of geography, and it will allow you to click on them and see the actual map of and boundaries for the census tract, dissemination area, even the dissemination blocks. So those are two tools that I hope I have time tonight to sort of show you If I don't have time, I'm hoping that you'll take the opportunity to explore them further, but I do hope we'll have some time to look at them. So that's a quick discussion about the proximity measures, a quick discussion about geography and how it's organized. Any questions before we delve into the census? Any questions? If not, let's take another step further. So we've begun this journey. We've identified census tracts that we might want to explore. We've even identified dissemination blocks we might want to explore. We potentially have identified census tracts and dissemination blocks that are not close to libraries that we might want to explore. How do you go about doing that? And what type of information could I find from the census that might be helpful to me? So just a quick introduction. Many of you may be familiar with the census of population. Census is by definition a complete enumeration of the entire population at a point in time. So we have a census of population conducted every 5 years. That census is generally the most complete and comprehensive data set that's available about Canada and its communities. And it's one of the few data sets that will allow us to get data for very small levels of geography, like census tracts, as well as detailed information about specific segments of the population. Generally, that type of information is not going to be available from other sources just because of sample sizes don't allow for that detailed type of reliable estimates. So the census allows us to identify right down to small levels of geography, how populations are changing, what the age structure is, what the social and economic and demographic characteristics of those communities are, and how they're changing. So we have a whole census workshop. Here, I'm going to do a little plug for StatsCan. We have a census workshop. It's a day-long workshop. We walk people through all the variables that are part of the census and all the different geography. If you have time, I encourage you. It's a free virtual workshop that if you have time, we're hopefully going to be offering it on our website soon. I think in April, I could be wrong. And if you do have time, or if you think it would be useful, I encourage you to please register and take it. I'm going to just spend a few moments just giving you a quick introduction to some of the very cursory variables that are available from the census, and then talk a little bit about using that information from the proximity measures, identifying the census tracts. How are some of those census tracts compared to the city as a whole, for example, the Regina as a whole, for example? So again, we can use census information as a starting point. This is what I referred to earlier when we talked about the National Statistical Agency as sort of a benchmark or a sort of a foundation to where you can start your research, and then look to see other data sources that supplement and add, bring texture and additional value to the data that the census provides. We can look to see how populations have changed over time. So we see Saskatchewan and the census metropolitan area of Regina and the city of Regina, what the population counts were in 2021. We see how they changed over time over the last 5 years. So we get an indication of the magnitude and the type of change that's taking place. But it's really interesting to take a look at some of the changes with respect to particular census tracts. And in this case, I've got the examples of census tracts in Regina and in the respective library that's located in those census tracts. And it's really interesting to look at, wow, City of Regina increased by 5.3% over the last 5 years between 2016 and 2021. And these are just random, well, not technically random. There was 9 dissemination areas, 9 census tracts. I purposely picked a couple of them, and then the others I just sort of added in. It just happened that all 4 of the examples I chose to use actually showed population decline between 2016 and 2021. That should give you a moment for pause and to start thinking about, the city as a whole is growing, but we're seeing census tracts that are declining in population. What might be the drivers? What might be the factors behind that? And so the census is going to allow us to sort of delve into that a little bit further. And we can look at things like age structure. How has the age structure changed over time? As I said, my background is demography. Age is a good indicator of behavior. Age is a good indicator of the type of services that people are going to need at different stages in the life cycle. So we can look at some broad classifications. I don't remember who asked the question. I apologize about the single year of age, but that question is getting to exactly what I'm sort of trying to allude to here. Is you can look at age data and use that as a planning tool and a tool to understand how communities differ. These are broad age categories, but you can look in more detail and you can explore what the data is telling you. So this is, again, for Saskatchewan and for the Census Metropolitan and City of Regina. How are those age structures faring in some of the census tracts we're interested in? So let's just take a look at, again, the 4 examples I've used out of the 9 that had libraries. How has the age structure changed in these 4 census tracts? And in this case, I went back, excuse me, I went back and I looked at the data, excuse me, for 2001. And it's interesting to look to see how the sort of age structure has changed over time. And I'll draw your attention particularly to the census tract where the Sherwood Library is located. You'll see NA, YNA. Well, because the census tract number is 0100.15. And when I showed you the slide about census tracts and how they change, they don't change geographically, they change by being split. And when the census tract is split, we'll add a decimal place. So we'll go from census tract 010000 to 0100010203. So you'll get an indication that if you were to look for historical data, you need to look to see what that current census tract or where that current census tract was located in 2021, in 2011 or 2016, and things of that nature. So you need to be conscious of those type of things if you do want to delve into historical analysis. And that's just the reality of working with data. But we get to look to see how the different census tracts fare with respect to how they compare to the Regina as a whole and how they're changing over time. I'm not going to go into all of the variables in the census. We simply don't have time, although I'd love to. I'll keep you here till midnight if you let me. But I just want to drive home the point that, the census is one of the sources of data, one of the few sources of data that allows us to get a sense of the social cultural composition of our communities and, the visible minority or racialized population of our communities, the indigenous population in our communities, immigrants and recent immigrants, all of those variables, those characteristics that sort of characterize our communities are available in the census. I've just used a couple as a sort of example and sort of encourage you to delve into them further. But we can look at, for example, the ethnic composition of city as a whole. In this case, is Regina CMA, Census Metropolitan Area, and how that differs for some of a couple of the census tracts that contain libraries. And so you can look to see how the George Bothwell compares to the Mamawai Taitatan, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But you can look to see how sort of the ethnic composition differs from different communities. And you can look to see those communities that don't have libraries. What is their ethnic composition? What is their age structure? What is their family composition? Those are all the things that you can do as well. So again, it's starting to paint a picture of how these communities differ. And that's the strength of the census. That's just one example. The other, there are a host of other examples. The census, again, is one of the most helpful and fruitful data sources with respect to languages, the languages that people are able to converse in, languages, a mother tongue, the first language learned and still understood. We talk a lot about inclusivity. We talk a lot about reaching out to people and making sure that we're reaching out to people as effectively as possible. It's really useful to be able to use census data and information on the types of languages people are speaking, the knowledge of languages other than English or French, indigenous languages that people speak. It's really useful to be able to have that information and look at small segments or small pockets of the community within Regina and say, can we do better at communicating to people in languages that they're comfortable in, that they're familiar with, as opposed to just the official languages. And so the census allows us to look at that type of information, a knowledge of language. You know, how many people speak only English? How many speak only French? How many speak language other than English or French, either as their first language learned or just in general, speak at home, speak at work. Those are all types of information that's available from the census. And so again, just carrying on the theme here, we can look and see the city as a whole, again, CMA, and how the census tracts differ with respect to non-official languages and how that diversity starts to emerge within the different census tracts in the communities and how that might be helpful. I want you to just pause now and think about, how can I use that information? I can use that information to get a sense of, you know, what other ways could we communicate? And you can look to see historically how that's been changing over time. And of course, I tried to sort of think about, well, what variables might be of interest? And I'd actually like to take a sort of a moment and you know, when we're finished, and get you to start thinking about what other variables would you like to know about that you think would be helpful in the context of understanding the role and the place and the accessibility of public libraries in Regina. Does education have an impact? What type of impact does it have? And so the census allows us to look at educational attainments, the highest levels of education obtained by population 15 years of age and over. You can even look at a more refined sort of data set that allows us to look at population 25 to 64. And, you know, maybe we want to refine that to say, well, some people might still be in school. Can we refine the educational attainment levels? You can. The census lets you do that. But this is just sort of a cursory introduction to think about, okay, how many people in Regina haven't completed high school? How many people in Regina hold a bachelor's university degree and a bachelor's degree or higher? How many people hold trades or apprentice certificates? Trades and apprentice certificates are really, if you look at the age structure of the industries and the occupations, and particularly those in trades. Now I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent because I don't actually have slides on this, but I'm going on a little bit of a tangent. But one of the nice things about the census is the census allows us to get really detailed information on industries and occupations, what we call NAICS and NOCS, the North American Industrial Classification System, and NOCS, the National Occupational Classification System. And it allows us to look at detailed NAICS and NOCS codes. More detailed the code, the more specific the industry or the occupation. And if you look at the age structure, particularly for people in trades, that's an aging population. So trades and college and apprenticeships are going to be crucially important going forward in the next little while. If we're going to continue to replace those people who are likely going to be leaving the labor force in the next little while. So that's my tangent. I don't mean to get off track here because that's not actually my focus of what I wanted to cover tonight, but I just wanted to sort of drive home the point of how you could look at education level citywide and then look to see how those education levels fare among the different census tracts where libraries are located. And again, I'm talking specifically about census tracts where libraries are located, but you're not limited to that. You could look at the census tract where a library is located and then adjacent census tracts and aggregate those groups together and look to see, you know, how those communities fare with respect to these similar characteristics. And you can use natural dividers like Albert Street or rail lines as a way to sort of distinguish areas that do and don't belong together. That's my city planning background coming through. But we guess, we can look to see of those 4 census tracts I've used, how the different educational attainment levels differ. And when we look at stuff like this, we start to think about what type of role can libraries play in different communities with respect to communities that have low educational attainment level overall, or communities that have high levels of educational attainment level. What role do libraries play? And how can the data help us understand those roles? And how can they be more beneficial to particular communities, or more focused for some communities as opposed to others? This is what the data is helping us understand. So just step back and think about sort of how the different communities, how the different census tracts vary with respect to educational attainment levels. And I won't spend too much more time, but I just wanted to use this as a springboard to sort of get you interested in thinking about how you can use census data. We can look at low income characteristics. So the census includes information on housing. I didn't include any of that here, but it has information on housing. The census has information on labor force characteristics. I didn't include any of that here, but it's available. The census has information on income, household income, family income, individual income. All of that is available. I didn't include it here just because I was afraid of how much time I would have to cover everything and still leave time for questions. But that data is all there. That data is all there to be delved into and explored. The census is also a source for low income data, characteristics with respect to the population in low income or in poverty. And there are a number of different measures on the census. There's the LIM, the low income measure, which is essentially half the median income. So half of the median income is considered to be, you're considered to be in low income circumstances. That's the low income measure, sort of a relative measure. There's the LICO, the low income cutoff, where families or households spending a certain percentage of their income on basic necessities plus 20% are considered to be in low income. And there's the market basket measure, which is since 2019 or 2017 is Canada's official poverty line. The census has all 3 of those low income measures. I just used the LIM as one of the examples here. And we can look to see sort of how the city fares with respect to different census tracts. So again, overall low income rates among children under 17, low income rates among very young children, and think about the impact that very young children might be experiencing with respect to families in low income. How can or what role can libraries play to sort of provide the opportunities that children need, working age population, and seniors. What's happening with respect to low income rates among seniors? And so we can look at just the city level, and then we can look to see how the different census tracts that I've talked about that have libraries, how they differ with respect to their low income circumstances. And what does that tell you about any potential role or consideration with respect to public libraries in the context of the city as a whole? So very quick introduction to just a cursory glance at some census variables that are available to us. I'm going to stop there because it's 9 o'clock for me, 8 o'clock for you. Any questions? And then if we have time, as I said, I'd love to sort of take you to the proximity measures database and GeoSuite. I'll show you GeoSuite, and maybe if I have time, sort of the attributes, the geographical attributes, as well as the census profiles and how you can find and download data from the census profiles. But before we do that, any questions?
We have one in the chat here. Well, we had one earlier in the chat too. Maybe I'll ask it. It was discussed a little bit in the chat already. It said, can we look at how to download some StatsCan data into a Panda data frame? And there is some, like they showed some links to the API and stuff like that. Like it looks like they were wanting to like download data from the Stats Canada website
Yeah.
and have it directly into a Panda data frame.
I don't know about so I will show you sort of the avenues with respect to downloading the various census profiles and things of that nature. They are sort of similar. There's sort of a couple of formats that are available. CSV formats, IVT, which is beyond 2020 format, and there's one more that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. So there are a couple of formats. Now, I'm not that familiar with Panda, so I don't know what format you would need to be able to export it into that, but we can certainly have that discussion.
You can use, if you can download it as a CSV,
Yeah.
like if you could programmatically use the Stats Canada API and then download it as a CSV, you can load that CSV file and you can make it into a Panda data frame.
There you go. So, and that generally, I mean, we do have the download option for downloading whole data sets and things of that nature for software development and things of that nature. But I'm going to focus more on just sort of the conventional common ways and show you how that data can be downloaded. And again, oftentimes people aren't aware of the opportunity to download data at the dissemination level or at the census tract level and how it can be done. So yeah, we can. I'll definitely, that's on my to-do list to show that for sure. And so, yeah, I'll be happy to do that. Any other questions? And before I jump into the website?
There was one. It was, is drive-in network distance data available on StatsCan as well?
Sorry, what was the question? I didn't hear the.
Is drive-in network distance data available? So I'm guessing like instead of I guess it was sort. I don't know if they maybe they will.
Yeah, please elaborate, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, when we're talking about the proximity data matrix.
Yes.
And it doesn't use the linear data, right? Linear data on a map. It uses the driving distance data, and I just driving network data. And I was like, is it available?
It does and it doesn't. So, okay, this is a fabulous question. Because there are 10 variables that are right now currently included in the proximity measures database. A couple of them are 3 kilometers based on driving distance. A couple of them are 1.5 or 1 kilometers based on walking distance. So they're not, there are multiple ways. In fact, maybe I'll take you to that right now and we'll go through and you'll see that the different measures are based on, the only one that the exception that I know is transit stops. But I think healthcare facilities are based on driving distance and schools and libraries are based on walking distance. So I think that might be getting at what you're asking, but we can explore that further and you'll see how the different measures, the services and amenities are actually characterized within the data set. So that's a great question. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So maybe that's the perfect springboard to let me dive into the website. So I just wanted to say, if people have questions, they're welcome to reach out to Statistics Canada, our InfoStats folks, if they have questions about the data. You're welcome to contact myself or Desiree, my colleague Desiree, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. So yeah, let me see if I can stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to cross my fingers that I can call up the Statistics Canada's website. See if I can figure it out here. So, has everyone seen the StatsCan website right now? Perfect. Okay, wonderful. So, not sure where to begin, but I think I'll start with the proximity measures database. I will say that for people who are new to the StatsCan website, I encourage you to sort of come and sort of explore and poke around a little bit. I cannot tell you how many times I've had people say, "Oh, I went to your website and I got lost." I wish I don't think I can count that high, but it is a challenging website. One of the things that I like to joke around is that one of the great things about StatScan's website is there are different ways to get to the same place within the website. And one of the challenging things about StatScan Web, there are different ways to get to the same place. So sometimes people get to somewhere and then they think, hey, how did I get here? So I like to sort of remind people that there are some tabs along the top. If you're not clear what you're looking for, one of the best places to start is just looking at the different subjects that for which sort of the 31 themes. I don't know if everyone's seen that, but of course, StatScan, we're going to collect data from you. I'm going to close that. There are themes that that can often serve as a starting point to sort of get you started if you're not clear on what you're looking for. So that's helpful. If you do have a rough idea of what data you're looking for, you can go to the data tab and you can look by particular surveys. So that's sort of helpful. And then, of course, there's a reference material that's really useful to be familiar with, sort of how the data is defined, how the data has changed over time. Those are sort of the necessary tools to make sure that you're using the data accurately and appropriately. Not the most exciting reading in the world, but crucially important if you're going to be working with the data. The analysis is, as the title suggests, these are where things like the daily and analytical arguments documents are reported. And then geography, we'll get into geography and then the census. So let's just start with the proximity measures database. And we'll go from there. And as I said, this is sort of you'll see the image I had on the screen with respect to the different location of libraries and the index score from 0 being 0 to 1 in terms of the index, proximity index. You can change the different variables. So if you wanted to look at the proximity to employment or grocery stores or pharmacies, you can do that online and you do that actively. But I think this might, the additional information with respect to how the variables or the services and amenities that are included in the data set are defined. And so we'll talk about the proximity to pharmacies is walking distance, proximity to healthcare is driving distance. And again, the proximity is based on the centroid or reference point. So not going to be exact, and this is a tool that's a working tool. But that's essentially how the information is collaborated and calibrated. And it's really trying to give an indication of how close those dissemination blocks are to the various services and amenities that are included. So I hope that sort of clarifies. And again, this will sort of drive the proximity to employment is driving distance within 10 kilometers. So there's not one distance and there's not one method. There's a combination of methods in the data set. So that's, and again, you can download the entire data set. You can look at a whole host of different variables, like I've said, public transit, libraries, things of that nature. And if you want to download the whole proximity data set, you can do so. And in fact, we'll just do it right now. And it gives you an opportunity of how comprehensive you want. Proximity measures data viewer, download the proximity measures database, as well as the description. So I believe this is going to be a CSV file. Let's see if I can download this. Yeah, so it's going to be a just an Excel file or CSV file. So that's the one option for that one. The census data has different download options that are available. So that's one quick introduction that I wanted to make sure we and again, if we have time, we can explore this. I'm encouraging you to sort of go to the measure and to do some exploring with the other tools that are available and the other variables that are available. And you can do it for other communities that you're interested in as well. So that's the first thing I wanted to highlight. Any questions on that? If not, the next thing I was going to just show, well, I'll go right to the census download, and then if we have time, I'll show GeoSuite. And again, some of you may be familiar with this, some of you may not. The tabs, I'm just going to go to the home page just to simplify things. So if people are coming to the web page again, they're new, they're not quite sure how to find what they're looking for. These, I call them tabs. Tabs at the top of the page can be a really helpful starting point. There's one that's specific to the census. We can click on it, and it'll census and population homepage or landing page, and that will take us to again different options that are available. We could look at specific census data. So somebody was asking about population by single year of age. That's going to be available in the data tables. So if I click data tables, and I can filter the results by age. This should provide a list of all the different information with respect to that I do. And you'll see that there are some tables that are available at by single year of age. Just making sure I did it correctly. Let's see if I can find one. Age by single year of age. So here you go. This is by Canada, provinces, census metropolitan areas, census agglomerations, and CMAs. So if I would open this data table, it would show us the population by single year age, as well as aggregate age groups as well. So that would allow you, I think you were, I don't remember who it was saying, well, I want to do 18 plus. This data set will allow you to sort of create your own age structure or age groupings, as opposed to being limited to the standard 5-year or 10-year age groups. So that's one example. And again, here, if you ever want to download, well, these are the download options. So beyond 2020, yeah, that's what I couldn't remember if there are any others. So they're all CSV options or beyond 2020. And other download options for developers. I believe it's the, what is it here? I can't remember what it is because I don't use it that often. Yeah, the SDMX data file that's available for developers. I don't use that often, so I'm not that familiar with it. So again, if you want to download a file, you can download as displayed what I have, or download the entire CSV file, or download it as a beyond 2020 file. And let me close that. One of the things that I like to sort of highlight, this is a very simple table, but you can add and remove variables to any of the data tables on Statistics Canada's website by going to the add and remove button. And you can add and remove additional details. Here we can add 2016 by simply clicking it and apply. And now we've got 2 census years on the data set, and we can download as such. So the only reason I highlight that is I was working with a very experienced census user, and he was saying, well, this table keeps saying that this has this variable, but I can't find it. And I showed him the data add remove, and he was like, oh, holy smokes. So I realized not everyone recognizes the add remove tab and how you can do it. So I thought, wow, I should probably start making sure that everyone is aware of that. So when I do these presentations, I like to remind people that any variable that has a plus sign in front of it, you can click on it and it'll give you options for more detail. If you click on the plus sign, it gives you options for more details. You click on the plus sign, it gives you options for more details, and iterative like that. So a very useful little tidbit, sort of what do they call a heuristic or shortcut that can sometimes be helpful and useful to data users. So there's your data by single year of age. It may not necessarily be at the level of geography, but you can look at, and one of the great things is all the data tables will give you an indication of what level of geography is included in the table. So I showed you the little hierarchy. As you start to become more and more conversant with the geographies as they are, there are hundreds of census tables. If you know that you're looking for census tract data, you can look at this and say, aha, I don't even have to open this table. I know that this table won't have what I'm looking for. So again, just a little heuristic, a little shortcut that can make it be a little bit more efficient in terms of looking for the data, looking through the data. So that's one step. And then again, the last step I wanted to, and I'm cognizant of the time, is to show these census profiles and talk about the fact that they can be downloaded as well and how they can be downloaded. So again, I'll just go back to the home page as a nice starting point. So sometimes people say, wait, how'd you get there again? So I always like to go back to the home page, start from scratch again, and go to the census again. And again, these tabs here will provide you with specific information. If I have time, I'll show you GeoSuite. We go to census data and census profiles. And I could theoretically type in a particular dissemination area. In fact, I thought I wrote down the number here, a particular dissemination area. Here we go. So if I were to let's do Saskatchewan. Let's do this. If I were to type in a specific dissemination area, 4706, this is an aside. The geographical code for Saskatchewan is 47. So any geographical code that starts with 47, you know that data is referring to Saskatchewan. The next number refers to the census division within Saskatchewan. So I know that City of Regina is in the census division 6 of Saskatchewan. So that's how the logic of our geographical coding system. Manitoba is 46. Any geographical code that starts with 46, I know right away it's Manitoba data. So, and there's sort of a quick tip for people to think about. But I just wanted to call up a particular dissemination area. And we should get the census profile for that particular geography. And this is a dissemination area within geography, or within Regina. And if you wanted to, so we have population change, population age characteristics, and a whole host of other variables with respect to housing types. And all those variables I didn't touch on because I didn't have time tonight are part of the census profile: marital status, family size, housing income, ethnicity, languages spoken. But I just wanted to draw people's attention to the additional information button. And you can click on that and it will take you to some additional information, metadata that can be really useful. One is it gives you a map of the actual area that we're referring to. I'll see if I can get out here a little bit so you can sort of put it in context. If you're familiar with Regina, you'll know specifically what area that's referring to. That would be what? Southeast corner of the city. So that would be associated with, I can't remember what school, what library that's associated with, but it's associated with a particular library. And you could look at questions like data quality.
I have a question.
Certainly.
Just relating to the map.
Yep.
It's all the comment question. Just noticed that the shape of that area looks a little bit odd. Like yeah, why would that be?
I don't know per se why that might be in this case. This is a dissemination, or this is a census. No, this is a dissemination area. So maybe because, as I said, there are certain thresholds for dissemination size. So once it gets to a certain size, we will sort of split it up or create a new dissemination area. To be honest, I don't know. It could be natural features, sometimes roads, railroads, ravines, whatever it might be. I mean, we're in the prairies, we don't have many ravines, but those are some of the factors. But I don't know, to be honest, what is sort of the factor behind that. Sometimes, in large cities, you'll get a large apartment building that could sometimes be its own dissemination area. So you'll find situations like that. It's building large enough. So there are a whole host of reasons that might explain. And this is just one example of being able to look to see if you're not clear how you can get a sense of what the geography you're looking at and how it relates to each other. The tool that's really useful, so that's the census profile. And so I'm just going, and I just wanted to sort of highlight the geography, so it'll tell you what city it's associated with and things of that nature. So again, these are the sort of the type of information. And if I wanted to download this data file or any profile, I go to the download option. And this is really useful for people who want to look for all the dissemination areas or all the census tracts. You can download the specific DA I've called up, or you can download the comprehensive files. And this will give you an opportunity to download all of the different levels of geography at the CSV. That was the format I couldn't remember. Tab and then IVT, which is beyond 2020. So you can download census subdivisions, which are basically towns and cities, but you can also download the dissemination areas and census tracts for all the prairies in the different formats, CSV, tab, or IVT. And pretty straightforward. If I wanted to find prairie census subdivision and dissemination areas, that's a large file, but just simply click on it and it's going to be an opportunity for downloading it right now. So that's how you would go about downloading those files, and then you can take those files and work with them. The last, I hope that's helpful. And the last point, I know we're almost out of time. In fact, I don't know, Corey, do you want to leave time for questions, or may I show one last thing?
Yeah, if we have any questions, then right now, or you can show one last thing too. I don't know if we have
one last point, and again, this might be something people are familiar with, but it's GeoSuite. And so if we go to Census tab, and I go to Geography, this is where you would go to get the attribute files that tell you how geographies have changed over time, but you can also go to GeoSuite. And GeoSuite's a really useful tool because it affords you the opportunity to look at this image here. The IQ should be familiar with everyone now. See if I can get it to load. And I'm just going to type in Regina. And it's going to ask me what there are different Reginas, the city of Regina, the place name of Regina, the census metropolitan area. I'll do census metropolitan area. I'll click it. I'll click apply. And we can look at the different levels of geography. So for example, if I wanted to look at all the census tracts in Regina, I simply click on the map and it now becomes active. If it's going to load, hopefully it'll load. There we go. See if I can get it to load census tracts. There. So that tells me that there are 61 census tracts in Regina. And if I wanted to look at a particular census tract, for example, census tract 16. Right now, that's the boundaries for the city of Regina, the CMA of Regina. I click on this individual census tract, it will automatically take me to the boundary for that particular census tract. And then if I wanted to know, if it'll let me see what dissemination areas are within that census tract. So that census tract has 12 dissemination areas. And within GeoSuite, if I wanted to see the specifics for each of these, I can click on this dissemination area and it will show me the dissemination area within that census tract. And if you wanted to, you can export all of the data by census tract or dissemination area as an Excel file or CSV file. So I just wanted to show people that because I want people to be familiar with how useful GeoSuite and tools like that can be for accessing the data and looking at the different geographical boundaries. So I was afraid of this. I was afraid I'd run out of time, and it looks like I've run out of time. Any questions? Have I encouraged you to explore StatsCan data set further? If I have, I'm a happy boy. I can turn in happy. If you do have questions, please feel free to reach out. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
There's multiple people in the chat saying that it was a good presentation.
Oh,
Fantastic
wonderful.
information.
Sorry?
Fantastic information.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. So now I'm glad I didn't wear a Bombers t-shirt. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Yes, please.
So one thing I do go to StatCan website. I work for a federal crown corporation. Sometimes we do need to, use some statistical data, and we do visit your website. Super awesome.
Is there any particular question or data set that you found particularly useful? Have you used the census data, for example? I suspect you have, but have you used census data?
Distributions we have, but especially election seasons. So one thing I wanted to ask about was, for example, once we wanted to figure out how StatCan calculates how to protect personal identifiable information, PII, and what kind of methodologies StatCan uses to do that. For example, you can have a farmer in a remote location, you can have 3 farmers in a very big location, and if you aggregate them, even still, it's very easy to identify who those customers are, or farmers are, or people are. Because one of them would be really rich, and one of them, you can figure out. So you're trying to figure out what number is too low, what number is too high, what number is too high in terms of their earnings and whatnot. So if you just lay them down in a percentile scale, you can always identify the top percentile and the bottom one. So I could not find a proper explanation or some sort of math explained where I could just borrow it and implement in my analysis. Sometimes I feel like that lacks that kind of explainability, the math behind.
And that's a fair question. And when we do get questions like that, so I will admit there's no standard threshold or anything of that nature. We have different divisions that collect different types of information, and they do have, sampling where stratified sampling where take all, take none, things of that nature, and the confidentiality in terms of protecting against direct or indirect identification of a respondent. So usually when I get questions like that, I usually reach out to the actual divisions within StatsCan, and we can get you. And if you want to send me an email with the specifics, I can reach out to the division within StatsCan. I can reach out to the subject matter experts within that division, and they might be in a position to sort of describe the mathematical models, the approaches they use, the methods and techniques. But I personally am not that familiar with the particular data set to be able to answer, but I can certainly try and help see if we can find some information. So if you reach out to me, I'd be happy to see if we can get the division provide some explanation. And that's actually part of my job, is we do get questions like that from data users who want further clarification of methodological changes or methodological issues or techniques. And I don't work with the data every day, but I can talk to the subject matter experts who do.
Yeah, that would be super helpful, because we
please.
do want to make sure that we follow the same methodology so there is no conflict and we are not showing something which shouldn't be shown. And awesome. Yeah, I'll reach out. Thank you so much.
No, wonderful. Thank you very much for your question. And again, it comes right back to the goal. I've sort of shared some tips with you today, is the goal that you're finding, you're using, and you're interpreting the data accurately and appropriately is really sort of the key.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Any other questions? I don't know how people feel. I mean, it's late here in Winnipeg, but if we're talking data, I'll stay all night if you let me. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much for the invitation. We really appreciate it. And I hope this was helpful. I won't speak for my colleague Desiree, but I hope you found it helpful, and we really do appreciate you giving us this opportunity.
Oh, I thought it was wonderful. Thank you for agreeing to come and give this talk.